where history's shadows cast long, unsettling doubts, the truth lies buried. From cryptic wartime codes to assassinations that scarred generations, unearth the secrets the world tried to forget. Host Tim Gardner guides you through a labyrinth of unanswered questions where every clue pulses with danger and intrigue, and perhaps an opinion or two. It's not all facts because history never is. Welcome to the Ciphered Past.
Welcome, everybody, to a new episode of Ciphered Past, episode 9. And my guest today is Robert Birch. Robert Birch is a fellow researcher. He's a friend of mine on X, and he is a very insightful and very intelligent individual when it comes to the case. And I think you guys will really enjoy what you hear from him tonight and his perspective. I am Tim Gardner, and I thank you guys for watching, also and listening on the podcast as well. Now, Robert, welcome to the show.
I appreciate you having me. This is a first one for me, and I'm pretty excited to be here.
Yeah, we're excited to have you, and it's been a year, hasn't it? I mean, just in general in 2025, we've seen a lot more headway this year than years past, with a lot of documents and whatnot since Trump released the files back in March. It seems like we're getting a lot more steam, but it seems like we're kind of being in the redundant area where we're kind of stuck too. I know we're not going to get all the files from Langley. I know that we're not going to get a quote unquote smoking gun, but like a lot of people out there talk about, the smoking gun pretty much is out there if you piece it together yourself, and that's just my opinion. Before we start off on the our agenda tonight, I'd like to get your opinion about that.
Well, I don't think we'll ever come across anything that is a smoking gun document or piece is long since gone. I mean, you look at the Secret Service burning their records. You got to imagine, the CIA did the same to the most part. Now, I did see the other day where apparently they stumbled across another storage facility or something that had more CIA documents in it that really didn't get a whole lot of publicity, but it's be interesting to see if anything. They keep finding these. Patel finding the burn bags of this and for the FBI, and then I think it was Christy Nome that found I think it may have been Gabbert that found this latest stuff with the CIA, but so much of that stuff you become desensitized over time that these are just misdirections, things to get people hopeful, and the true story is never going to come out. I don't think, because you have so many people that are even on the side of conspiracy that are deliberately leading people down a bad road, to lead them. Okay, go this way. So look over here. Here's this smoking. Look at this crazy guy that was involved. He could have been him. And it gets people to turn their head. And really, for the average person, which I really honestly consider myself as, the person that dabbles here and there and reads a lot, but doesn't really go sit at the National Archives and things. It's easy to say that Ed Greer turned around and shot, or Greer turned around and shot him from the front seat. That one's cracked me up since the day that it came out, or that he was shot by the follow-up car when They jumped up with the M16 and accidentally shot him in the back of the head. Those kind of things come out, and I think they're all misdirections. But I think enough really good, solid research has been done, um, that you can, just like you said, you can piece together with pretty good, um, you know, factual base of things that definitely happened, witnesses that are truthful, because you can look through all these different books, and a lot of them have the same information, but sometimes it's different people saying the same thing. So you build this line of, there's several different clues to nobody saw Oswald come down the stairs after the shooting. Nobody saw him all actually on the sixth floor at the time. Howard Brennan even admitted being a false witness basically years later. Actually, not even years later, but he couldn't even pick Oswald out of a lineup, and they came up with a story that he was afraid for his life if he picked him out. Well, I mean, he was the only guy that looked like he'd been beat up by the cops that was in the lineup, so pretty sure it would have been easy to pick him out. He couldn't see him. He was telling somebody what they wanted to hear. But you piece a lot of this stuff together, and you come up with a map that, when you start seeing several different researchers converging on a similar path, um, even though they kind of get there maybe different ways, it really starts to connect dots, and it's obvious to see who didn't do it. I really appreciate um Josiah Thompson's research, because he doesn't go after the who, he goes after the where. And Last Second in Dallas was uh, probably one of my favorite books that I've read, because when you go through that and you look at the research he did, you look at what he lays out with blood splatter evidence, with things on the Zapruder film, um, and you lay out where these bullets actually would have come from. It's pretty solid and scientific. And then I've seen others that have done similar research that have come up with similar ideas. So you have to be careful in what you read. You have to be careful which rabbit hole you really want to run down. But there's a ton of information out there. You just got to figure out what's credible and what's not.
Yeah, and I agree. I mean, I think the thing for me when I mentioned about like it's all out there, I think it's pretty obvious. The last show I had Paul Blow on, and we're talking about how like everything is so obvious in front of us. So when you look at the like, you know, the circumstances that Oswald was facing, everything was super obvious, right? Whether it be the backyard photo with the revolver that he had, and of course the Carcano, and then the Fair Play for Cuba, paper, or the communist paper that he had in his hands. I mean, we're going to be talking about Roscoe White later, which is a fascinating topic because we'll get into that later. But there are ties there with that photo with Roscoe White, and I look forward to your opinion about that when we talk about that later in the show. But my point is that there are a lot of obvious things that they really tried hard to tie Oswald to be the guy. And if you look at the things that are out there, like eyewitness reports, and even really important people like Jesse Curry, who had came out later on and said that he believes that there was multiple gunmen. And we're talking about the chief of police of Dallas, the guy that was on Air Force One with Lyndon Johnson when he was being sworn in, when he should have been out in Dallas with his, his precinct of officers looking for whoever, or even if Oswald was in custody, he should have been with them. So, um, you know, my big thing on this is if you do the research on the things that are obvious, you'll be able to pick out what I mean. It's pretty easy because the timing of Oswald after the assassination. I mean, it's virtually impossible. And why I say that is because if you look at how, I mean, if you kill a president of the United States, the most powerful man in the world, the most famous man in the world at that particular time, you're going to either be like, you're going to go away. You're going to try to get away as fast as you can. You're going to be a ghost. You're not going to go on a bus. You're not going to go on a cab. You're not going to go home casually and change your clothes. You're not going to go kill a police officer. Then you're not going to go ahead and go to the movie theater and get popcorn. You're not going to be doing any of that. You're not going to be doing any of that. You're going to eat. You're going to get away from that place. And most recently, what we saw with Tyler Johnson, the alleged assassin of Charlie Kirk, we saw him bolt the area right away. Obviously, with Trump, we saw his alleged assassin, Thomas Chris. He had gotten killed by police, and it's just interesting with the long narrative that we have on that way. But anyways, I'm going in I'm going down on my own little rabbit hole and tangent here. But what I will say is that it's obvious. There's a lot of obvious things out there if you're one to piece it together. So, anyways, thanks for letting me rant on that.
Yeah. Well, the easiest thing to go back to me is to the very beginning of the case, the very weekend of the case. Dallas knew they did not have enough evidence that they would not win a trial. There's reports all over the place of Henry Wade in front of public saying, yes, this is the man, we got him, because that's what they're telling him to say. But in realistic terms, they didn't have any evidence on him. They didn't have any. They had no prints on the gun. They had the paraffin test showed nothing. You know, how does a guy order a rifle in a fake name but have it sent to the post office box in his real name? Immediately, that rifle would have been sent back because AJ Hadell had no reason to get anything in that PO box. That was such a weak story. The fact that the money order was not even cashed, it's not even a real money order. Those things. Those are the weekend of that. A good detective would have said, "Hey, we don't have it. We don't have the goods on this guy." But the FBI came in and took over pretty much a lot of it, and even Hoover said, "Don't have much of a case against the guy." But they were shouting, it's him, it's the lone nut. We got to make sure everybody knows it's him. Hoover's excuse was we don't want to start a war with Cuba and then going into Russia and all these other things, and we don't want to lay this at the feet of Russia because he lived there. And they all knew what was going on, but there was no case. There was no eyewitness that definitely said it was him. Like I said, Howard Brennan that spotted him from the window below or standing down below, looked up in the window and spotted him, but couldn't pick him out of a lineup. Helen Markham, the crazy witness that they depended on for him being the Tippit killer, couldn't pick him out of a lineup, wasn't sure. All these things, and her story changed over and over and over and over and over again. But that's all within that weekend before he's even assassinated. So you start with when you get to that premise that okay, they didn't have a case. The only thing that they had against the guy was that he worked in the building, and then you take from there and you start looking at, well, none of this stuff makes sense. Like I told you earlier when we were talking, the guy's like the Forrest Gump of shooters. He just so happens to be in and around all these events. Whether it is his uncle that works for the mob, his time in the Marines where he's training at some secret locations, the people that are in Japan with him at the time, when he comes back, no problems. Bring your Russian wife, bring your child. We're not even going to bother questioning you. Come on in. We'll even pay for it. How he even got to Russia in the first place is a pretty wild tale. And these are things that are documented. They're not just made up. And then how he moves between Dallas and New Orleans and all. I mean, this is a guy that couldn't hold a job, had no money, but yet he's constantly going between Dallas and New Orleans and other places, and he just starts showing up everywhere. I mean, he's in with Guy Bannister. He's in in the same building with. Even if this is all coincidence, there's no way you could hit all those dots and then be a total lone wolf. I mean, there's just no way. There's too many connections to too many people that have been proven to have FBI and CIA ties. Whether it's DeMoor and Shield, whether it's Ruth Payne, uh, and um, her family and her sister who work for the CIA. Um, you just have all these people around him constantly that are moving him from place to place. I mean, the guy worked at the Riley Coffee Company. He was the things that he was doing down in New Orleans. There's no way that wasn't a logical person could really look at that and go, oh, he just happened to be there at that time. Of these people that are involved in all these Cuban operations and all these other things that are all CIA activities, he just happens to be there. So, when you start looking at that and you look at there's no real evidence today of him doing anything other than, walking out of the school book depository. If, according to, I guess it was Corey, if he was even in the school book depository that day. But, um, it's just, there's no way that it's too neat of a bow to tie on something. And everybody always points back to, well, nobody can justify in their mind how this loser of a guy killed the greatest man in history. So they have to make up all these stories around him. You don't have to make them up. They're there. I mean, he's surrounded by people that move him around a chessboard from the time he's 17 years old until the time he died. He was what, 24 when he died? So he had 7 years of, uh, feeling like he was a part of whatever he was a part of. And he was doing his job of where he was being moved to go.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree with that. And the covert way that he had handled things, you can be assured that he wasn't broke. I mean, it was all a front. Like a lot of that was a front, and it was artificial. And I even go as far as Buell Wesley Frazier being part of it, which, I mean, you could put two and two together when he's talking to Captain Fritz in the office talking about curtain rods. It's interesting that they were able to use the curtain rod story with Lee Harvey Oswald, bringing in curtain rods into work. Yeah, I worked in the curtain rod factory. Yep. Yeah. Well, that's what I'm saying. There's so many bizarre coincidences in all this, Robert. I mean, like, it's just a lot of bizarre stuff. Why would Lee Harvey Oswald take a photo of himself with the murder weapon of J.D. Tippit and the murder weapon of President Kennedy, and also have a communist newspaper, and he would sit there? And I mean, that never makes sense to me. It just never makes sense. It doesn't. And there are conflicting. Oh, and how we got like a bubble on his wrist? How'd that happen? And we again teasing Roscoe White later. But yeah, I mean, I think this guy just got screwed. And I think one of the best presentations, if you were to ever see it, or if anybody watches it just in general, is the press conference when the reporter tells him, yeah, you've been charged in killing the president. The look on his face, it is the most, it, it's like one of those things where, when you find out, I don't know, like you've been completely deceived. That's
Well, he was so calm for the most part, being drug around through all those reporters up and down the hall. Even though he was asking for representation, he was denying everything. He wasn't. If he's a guy that always wanted attention, like his brother said, and others have said that he just always wanted to be somebody, he would have been on his high horse, and you can see him gradually throughout the day figuring out what happened, and it culminates when, and I forgot the reporter's name. I actually watched an interview with him, and he said the same thing. He said, I think his exact words were, "No, no one has told me that. Um, other than the reporters in the hall. And then you hear this guy say, "No, you've been charged with the murder of the president." And he looks back down at him, and he says it again. And it's just that deflated look in his face, like he knows I'm screwed. And he probably knows at that point he's not walking out of that building alive because he knows way too much and he knows how those things work. I mean, his attitude from that point on is totally different than when you see him earlier in the day, and he's a little feisty. He's wanting representation. He's wanting all the things that he knows he's should be getting, but he's being denied. But at that moment, when that reporter tells him you have been charged with the murder of the president, it's just the wind. Everything goes out of him, and he knows he's done. And I think it's funny that uh, going back to Frazier, I don't think that was his rifle. That I think that was the rifle from the roof. That Robert Rodin's actually got the video of them with that rifle. I'd never seen it before, and I'd wanted to see it forever. And then he was on another show, and I watched it, and I was like, "Holy crap! That's them bringing the British Enfield down from the roof." And then they just miraculously find a British Enfield at Bill Frazier's house. That was basically probably to scare him into, "You're going to do whatever we tell you to do," or they had pre-typed confessions for him. They were ready. They were ready for them when they came in. They knew what the game was, and it just was. Of course, it wouldn't fly. Well, you say it wouldn't fly today because everybody has phones, but look at Charlie Kirk's deal. You know, there's a lot of things that don't fit in that. That's a whole different story.
Yeah, yeah, and you brought up a really good point about that. I mean, I think in Fraser's case, I think what they were looking to do, if the Oswald thing kind of backfired, right, which it didn't, but let's say that he had gotten killed, I honestly believe there's a possibility that they would have, and this would have made more sense to me. And this is what allegedly I've read and been told by fellow researchers, that Angleton thought the whole idea was absolutely stupid about the lone gunman. He thought it was baseless. It was like, how are we even going to even sell this to the public? But he obviously was right in my opinion, because the fact is that you're going to try to sell a public on a lone gunman, and people haven't believed it. I mean, it's been an overwhelming poll. They haven't believed it. But my point is I do believe that if the Oswald thing had backfired, if they killed him, I believe that they would have charged Buell Wesley Frazier, and this is my opinion alone. They would have charged Buell Wesley Frazier for the murder of the president, and also had Oswald associated with the murder as well. So they would have used the two gunman aspect of it. But since Oswald lived, I believe that plan backfired. So
I've heard that he was the backup patsy before, from just other conversations that I've had with people, and it makes sense. I mean, he's kind of right there, and young, impressionable, and scared. And his story over time has. I mean, if you watch interviews, of course, if you watch the Sixth Floor Museum interviews and all that, they're interesting to say the least. And I love the Sixth Floor Museum. I've been there probably 10 times. I'm not far away from Dallas, being in Arkansas, and um, I love being up there because of just it's an eerie feeling. But the more I go up there, the more that I see, no, that's not right. That's not right. I actually, the last time that I went, we were at a volleyball tournament for my daughter, and during a break, we went over there, and it's me and her, my son, and my wife, and I started talking to him at the the layout they have of Dealey Plaza. Have you been there before? The layout where they have all the string, showing where the shots came from and all that. I'm sitting there just talking to my family, telling them, you know, there's no way this could have happened this way, this, and this. And the next thing I know is the whole table surrounded by people. They thought I worked there, and was telling people about what really happened. And I turn around and look, my family's over sitting on a bench, like bored out of their mind. And I'm over here talking to this group of people about, you couldn't have been here. And this was a couple years back, about 4 years ago, I think. And after that, I was basically asked to shut up or leave the building because I was giving conflicting reports to what they had in there. When we started, this whole group started kind of a conversation back and forth of things of, well, what do you think about this? What do you think about this? Uh, and I was just answering questions to the best of my knowledge. And they don't like that there. They don't like people defending uh, alternate theories, even though probably 90% of the people that walk in there believe alternate theories. It's, that is that is a frozen moment in time of the Warren Commission building is. Got a lot of amazing artifacts in it, a lot of great, photos and things, but they've gotten a little looser. I've noticed in some of the interviews and the things that they've had that they do listen to the I don't know if you've ever seen the uh, Robert Blakey and the Warren Commission attorney had a back and forth on the HSCA findings versus um, the Warren Commission findings, and Blakey just rips the guy apart. And the guy that was on the Warren Commission is so arrogant. And Blakey is being very respectful at the beginning. By the end of it, I think Blakey's about to go over there and fight him because the guy is such an ass. But it's a really great thing to watch. But Blakey was so focused; it was all mob. He was, he got led down a different trail because, well, who was driving all the evidence to the HSCA? They had they had James Jesus Angleton in there, or was it him or Joe Neady's that was in there? It was Angleton. It was had supposedly been detached from all that and wasn't involved. And then when Blakey found out afterwards, he goes, I wouldn't believe anything conclusion that we came up with because he realized he'd been played. Um, so it's just it's it's sad to see that it makes me question everything that goes on now. I mean, I lived through Bill Clinton as governor when all the MENA scandal went down and the Iran Contra stuff. That all came through Arkansas. That all came through a tiny airport in Mena, Arkansas. And there was a wider web of things that happened within the state. I won't bore you with all that stuff, but you start seeing all that stuff and you start realizing just how dirty all these guys play. And, I really truly believe that, our country's been run by intelligence agencies for years, really since 1963. Well, actually before that, when, you know, uh, all the CIA was brought in as a fact-finding agency, but there was background agencies already formed, 5412, Operation 40, and all that stuff um, that they were already running policy, and um, and it's just kind of been that way ever since.
Yeah, I would argue that, well, not argue with you per se, but I would argue with that it started during Eisenhower's tenure of the because he gave them full autonomy to an Alan Dulles and company, and Alan Dulles was obviously, if anybody out there has read The Devil's Chessboard, it's a really good background about the mannerisms of Alan Dulles. And Dulles himself was involved with the fruit company down in South America. Him and John Foster Dulles. If you haven't read the Devil's Chessboard, people out there, you have to. It's a must read. It's one of the best books I've ever read. And I believe it kind of started in the 50s when Eisenhower was president. And I believe it really went after the Korean War. That's when everything started getting into domestic terrorism, per se. I believe it really, really went up a notch after the Cold War. And then we saw what happened to Kennedy. And I believe that's ever since then, we've had that trickle down effect. Even manipulations when it comes to elections, the Vietnam War, which the opiate battle distribution to America for the neighborhoods, which Gary Webb had talked about, all the way down to Iran Contra, like you mentioned, in your neck of the woods of Arkansas, with in that area. So, I mean, all the way up to 9/11. I mean, I'm not a big conspiracy guy, Robert, but I do believe that if you're, I mean, Theodore Shackley was linked with all this. He was the blonde ghost, and I believe that he and other several members of the CIA helped link a lot of these things down through history. It's just, you get a new person on it. It's just on the era. With a new name, and that's it. But it's the same mantra that they follow, and I believe that's where we are right now when it comes to files. We're never going to get the files that anybody's looking for, because, like you mentioned perfectly in the beginning of the interview, it's just, that's a smoke screen itself. They're laughing at us. They don't care if we ever get the truth or not. But I would argue that in order to actually build trust with the American people again, you would have to come clean with that, and you would have to restart a program like that would focus on international intelligence versus domestic.
Well, the thing that I can't get over with the new committee is why is Jefferson Morley the voice of reason for Luna's committee? Why is he the sole? I mean, I know they've had other people in front of the committee. I know they had Oliver Stone, they had Jim DiEugenio, they had one of the Parkland doctors, they've had Douglas Horn, but it seems like everything goes to Jefferson Morley. And why does he get to control the narrative? That should be going to the National Archives, and where anybody can dig into it, but yet they're going behind his paywall. That doesn't seem right. Um, and is that where they're scrubbing some of this stuff? I mean, you know, I watched Luna's interview on Patrick Bet David's podcast. It was good. I mean, she's a very entertaining person to listen to, and but she's a little over the top on. Yeah, she believes there was a conspiracy, but she won't really say what. She's sure there was this, but she doesn't go into any detail on it. And then anything that's getting released like that is somehow going into the Mary Farrell Foundation instead of the National Archives. That doesn't seem right. And I'm not a guy that goes and searches the National Archives. I mean, I appreciate Mary Farrell Foundation for what they do, but that's not the designated uh, place for these files. The law reads that it goes to the National Archives, and somebody needs to explain why that's going. I think the main one was all the Russian documents. Why was that going straight to Mary Farrell instead of uh, to the National Archives, where you and I could go view it if we wanted to?
Yeah, and allegedly, I don't want to be very careful how I preface this when it comes to explaining this, but what I would like to say is that um, there have been allegations that there are documents you can get access to if you start a subscription, yada yada yada. I don't know if there's a monthly fee on that. I don't subscribe to that particular entity, and I don't involve myself in that. I have some really good friends who are working on the project with the JFK Act, and so I support them. And I I don't approve of the way how they've been treated through this. And so, I mean, it's sort of like if you do a lot, you behind the scenes, you do a lot of work, but you don't get any credit for it. I think that's just, it's ridiculous. So, but anyways, where I'm getting with this is that, yes, I do believe that they belong in the National Archives. My issue is that, um, I don't know what really goes into that. I mean, according to the JFK Records Act, they were supposed to be there. Why are they at the Mary Farrell Foundation? I do not know. First, I mean, you're talking about three different sorts of files. You're talking about the Joe and Edie's file. You're talking about the Harvey file, and of course, you're talking about the KGB files that are there as well. Let's not forget the Diaz files. They're all supposed to be in the National Archives because they are part of the JFK Records Act. So yes, that's a great point. They should be there. And to answer your question about the man who is leading this task force right now. Who else would lead it? I mean, can you come up with any names that you think that would be
Well,
good?
I don't have a problem with, um, you know, with Jefferson Morley being involved and all that, but it's like I said, it's the fact that it's going behind a paywall on his site is the iffy part. Him being involved, and it's still going to the National Archives, no big deal. Him being involved and getting first crack at the documents and all is a little strange to a point. Um, you know, I would want somebody that's honestly kind of outside the realm of long time assassination researcher because I think a lot of assassination researchers get in their rabbit hole and they stay there and they want to find ways to push everything to their rabbit hole, whereas I'm somebody that looks at and I'm not bragging about this. I look at a lot of different things and a lot of different researchers and can piece together kind of what fits and what doesn't. And so having somebody, and I'm not advocating, definitely not for me. I don't want to do it. But I think I would rather have somebody that was not, that could work with a lot of the superstar researchers that are out there, but not be the one leading it. So you get a little more involvement, and these documents can get a little bit better opinion maybe of them. I don't know what goes on behind the scenes for the documents and all that, but uh, I just know that there's it just seems fishy that way. But you know, like I told you when we were talking before, I don't. We're never going to see the things that we want to see. We're never going to see Ruth Payne's tax records. We're never going to see Lee Harvey Oswald's tax records. We're never going to see the, um, some. Obviously, we can't see the travel documents of the Secret Service because they destroyed them all, uh, and admittedly destroyed them.
Uh, well, on Roscoe, I think the important thing is to understand that he had gotten a job with the Dallas Police Department in the fall of 1963. The timing is weird on a lot of occasions, and I'd like to pick your brain about the timing on other things as well here in just a minute. But what I find odd by it is that he had one of the original negatives of the photos in allegedly in his locker, and like you mentioned, he had served in the same, I believe, was it the infantry unit that they were over there in Japan? I believe they served in the same unit. Um, and then if you add everything up together, like you said, Geneva was working with Ruby, and then like things are just really super obvious in this, right? I mean, he had to have known Oswald prior to all this. I mean, he probably was pretty close with Oswald. I mean, we don't know. That's something that Corey or John Armstrong would definitely be able to tell us about. But um, if I were to look into it, Robert, I would say that I think it is a possibility that he what did the backyard photo, um, because of the scar, like you mentioned, because of how obvious the photo is. If you look at the photo itself, and Paul had talked about the last episode, if you see where my nose is right there, right where my lip is, he believes that it goes up from here to about right here, and they got about that much. Okay, and that's why the shadows look off on that photo. No, no, yeah, yeah. And wasn't it more of like a kind of like as they would quote, a butt jaw, or like, I don't even, the jaw he had. I gotta look at that photo again one more time, but yeah, let me do a closer look, and I'm gonna put this on the I'm gonna put this after I edit the show. I'm gonna put the backyard photo while we're talking about that. Okay, let me look at it close up. Usually I had it ready but due to my technical difficulties right now, I don't have. Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, yeah. So the audience, as they could see right here on there, you could see even his cheeks are a little bit saggy, right? So like, it just doesn't add up whatsoever. That's like he had mentioned, it is superimposed. But anyhow, no, I believe that he was. I believe that was not him, and I believe what he had said. The guy was just everywhere. The problem with him is that he was such a sensitive like asset to whoever he worked with. We don't know. I mean, we're never going to know how sensitive he was, because he allegedly was dabbled with the FBI. He was allegedly also dabbled with the CIA, of course. And I feel like sometimes the more I hear this story, Robert, it's like he's playing both sides to a certain degree. The phone call that he made in North Carolina. Let's talk about the phone call. He was trying.
You know, the crazy thing is Roscoe White was on the same boat as Oswald going to Japan. And so it's another one of those instances where he just happens to be on the same boat. They were both stationed in Japan. Um, Not a lot of conversation of whether they knew each other or not, but if you look at some pictures of Roscoe White when he was in the military, there's one or two pictures where he's standing almost exactly like the backyard photos, and you can match up some of the things. I think there's a scar on his forearm or something like that that you can see in some other things. But he's another one of those guys that just suddenly pops up in, I think, October, working for the Dallas Police Department in their photo department. And so this guy's a photo expert, and basically the same size, same build, a lot of similarities to Oswald. And um, they find these pictures um, that you can find 10 sources that will tell you that they're real and 10 sources that will tell you that they're faked. Let your eyes do the work for you, and if you look at them close enough, you can tell the discrepancies in them. You can tell. I mean, when you lay the faces over them, one on top of the other, they're the exact same angle face. It's like just the face has been printed on or put on those bodies. Like there's no different turn. There's no slight angle, anything on those. And there's some sloppy work done because you know the um, ring finger shows up. I think you pointed out the little bulge on the wrist. The ring flips back and forth in pictures. The shadows don't line up. Um, and, if you look closely at the rifle, it doesn't match the one that came out of the book depository. The sling's different. And I mean, it's just, eh, and one of the pictures miraculously shows up years later in a book that George de Mohrenschildt had, or I think it was an album or something, that one of the third of the three pictures shows up. Of course, the wonderful wizard of Ruth Payne, just who happens to show up with every little piece of information that is needed at the time it's needed. Um, After they searched all this stuff, they didn't find anything. And then they come back and they go, "Oh, look, here's pictures of him with a gun." Um, I mean, the photos never really jived with me from early on, because when you just look at them, they just don't look real. And then there's the picture of I think one of the Dallas police officers, I believe, in the backyard, making the same pose. Um, and it just, and I've read Admitted Assassin. Um, I don't know if I believe that Roscoe White was, the one that killed J.D. Tippit, the one that was sitting over the fence, and doing the shooting there. I mean, it kind of fits some points of the narrative, but that whole story is, of how they found the information, then suddenly lost the information. Um, it's pretty crazy, but the fact that his wife worked for Jack Ruby, he knew Jack, and he was spotted with Tippit and with Ruby, and it's just another one of those pieces that if you just logically look at things, there's got to be something there. And whether you go as deep as, um, thinking he was the Mandarin behind the fence, as it's claimed in the book, I don't know, but he's another one of those guys also that died a weird death. Died in a fire, a really weird fire where he was working. Um, but it just you just can't have all these people connected. But the fact that he was tied to Oswald in the Marines, went through the same type training. I'm sure both of them were O&I when they were over in Japan. Oswald was being used to try and find a, a mole that was that was leaking information out when he was over there, and I'm sure Roscoe was probably doing similar. But I mean, again, same size, same build, same look. I mean, Roscoe was a little more imposing figure, but not by much. I mean, neither one of them were big guys, but how does the guy just suddenly pop up in Dallas in October and become the head of their film or their photography department, and or not the head of it, but working in their photography department when they suddenly needed these pictures of Oswald? And Oswald himself said, from his work at Jagger Stovall, that or Jagger's Child Stovall or whatever, that he had done photograph work and he could tell they were fakes. And so it's it just gets to be too much. And if any of the story of Roscoe White is true, that's a wild story. Um, but if that much of Roscoe White's story was true, I don't think Roscoe would have lived as long as he did. I think he would have been probably gone not much longer after Oswald was, because they just can't let those guys run around.
Yeah, and when we talked about how arrogant he was, I think he had every right to feel arrogant, Robert. I think he felt like he had the protection of the FBI or the CIA behind him, and I believe that's why, because that's all that people talked about. They said that he was very arrogant, cocky, brash. Um, I would be too. I initially, so my thought process is I think that he was assigned something that day, right? But he wasn't. I don't believe in any fabric of my being that it was to shoot Kennedy. I think there have been a lot of credible researchers that have talked about that he was scheduled to go out in a Redbird, maybe to Cuba, or they were going to kill him on that Redbird. I think something in regards like that. But yeah, I mean, like you said, he was a chess piece, and he felt like he was heavily embedded with the agency and or the FBI. And it's interesting because Hosty said a week prior to the assassination, there was a letter there that was destroyed after Oswald had gotten killed. And so we don't know exactly where the contents of the letter was. I don't believe Hosty when he said that it was about stay away from my wife. I believe that's a bunch of BS. But what's your take on that?
Yeah. Or the receptionist that said it was something about blowing up the building or anything like that. I mean, it's actually one of you know, the movie JFK is really just a lot of conspiracies thrown against the wall. and kind of formed into a movie that makes you question what was going on. But one of the great lines in that movie is, you know, that they believe that Oswald was passing information through Hosty, because why not destroy that? Or why destroy that? Because if that's what it really said, because that makes the crazy lone nut look even crazier. But to burn it and claim, I'm gonna go the Gerald Posner route. His I don't want to say his change in thinking, but his new kind of avenue is, or has been for a little while, that the CIA doesn't want to release this stuff because they want to protect all the dirty things they were doing. Not the assassination, mind you, just the other dirty things that would come out that they were doing. The FBI didn't want this stuff to come out because they want to protect them, that the guy walked in their office a couple of days before. I don't buy that. I don't buy that. Now, I do agree that they are probably withholding a lot of documents because they don't want to be embarrassed of things they've done. One of them being involved in the murder of the president, and if anything, um, definitely complicit in the massive cover up that happened after it. But these pieces don't move around on their own. None of these do. Guy Bannister doesn't move around on his own. David Ferry doesn't move around on his own. Roscoe White doesn't show up when he does. Lee Harvey Oswald doesn't show up in all these different places and in other places when he's over in Japan. I mean, the groundwork was played for us in 2025. It's almost kind of silly to look back and go, "Gosh, man, it's obvious that you're moving these pieces around like this when it all comes out." But that's because we have more of the information. Back then, nobody really had the information, um, and nobody really knew a lot because the um, investigation was so shoddy that they wrapped it up neatly, and for the most part, people bought it. And Alan Dulles said it, and he is one of the creepiest sounding people I've ever heard. Dulles said it, that he doesn't think people will read anymore. And he even said in one of the interviews, he goes, "Well, I'm not saying that it wasn't more people. We just didn't find any evidence of it." Well, yeah, you did. Um, I was kind of excited. I got this yesterday from 1966. Uh, Never read it. Always wanted to, and I've watched all of his interviews with people and everything. But going and actually reading it, I mean, he was right on it from the beginning. He really was. And I think it was you and Corey's conversation is that there were so many people that were so close. They just couldn't make that last couple connections because at that point, the CIA and FBI were so far ahead. Um, you know, but there's no doubt. I mean, you look back and I'm a believer that the lead that called and ratted out the November 2nd plot in Chicago was Lee Oswald. I believe that he thought he was there to do something similar at this one. When it went wrong, he went to his designated meeting spot, which was obviously the Texas Theater, with his half ripped dollar in his pocket. Goes and sits next to everybody just about in the theater, um, and was there from all accounts before Tippit was shot. He was there around 105, 107. Um, and then when he gets arrested, when he goes in, and when he is, like you said, he was kind of arrogant and confident that whole time because he's just waiting for the FBI to whisk him away at some point. And when, like we talked about at the beginning, when he hears you've been charged with the murder of the president, that's when he knows he's toast. That's when he has truly been sacrificed for this thing, and probably knows he's going to be dead soon. But you just, again, it's all these things that are swirling around it. Now, if I was in a conversation with, you know, somebody that was really, fairly well researched on the lone nut side, they could rip apart a little bit of this at a time in an argument because I'm not as versed enough to go deep point for point with a guy. Because again, I'm just kind of an average everyday interested former or not former history major that loves this stuff. But you know, it all goes back to, you know, what do your eyes tell you? What does your mind tell you when you look at when you lay everything out in front of you? You look at the evidence. I've stood in that sixth floor window or the one next to it, and it's not an impossible shot if you're taking one shot. If you're within 6 to 8 seconds taking three shots, and we haven't even touched medical evidence or anything like that. I mean, that's a total different. Um, I was watching before we got on the Jim Jenkins interview with Patrick Bet David. If you haven't seen that, it's awesome. He and I can't remember Paul's last name, were the two interns or whatever that were there that handled all this stuff. And he flat, I mean, the autopsy flat out says there's 20 witnesses to autopsy that says the back of his brain was blown out. First got there, and the timing that everything got there. But you know, it's you stand in that window and you look out, and it's a creepy feeling. I've been in three spots. I've been in Ford's Theater, I've been in the Lorraine Motel, and I've been in Dealey Plaza. And those are the three eeriest places I've ever stood because of what happened in those three spots. Um, but looking out in that window next to the sixth floor window, even though I don't think a shot came from that window. I think a shot came from the other window at the other end of the building, personally. Uh, and those were the back shots. But um, you just look at that and you look at that X on the ground, and even though the limo had slowed down and everything else, that is, and I'm a hunter. I've killed deer at much further distances than that with much better rifles than a Manlica Carcano piece of junk. Um, but it's still not an easy shot. And in that amount of time, you can't rescope your target. You just can't. I mean, and make an accurate shot like that. I mean, I think if anybody was shooting from that window, it was the distraction shot. So if somebody actually shot from that window, I think it was perfectly or purposely the distraction shot. And that got everybody looking one way. And then you had the records building, either the roof or the other end of the book depository and behind the picket fence. Um, and there is some thought of a shooter being on the opposite side of the railroad bridge of where um, Skinny Holland and all those guys were. Um, I'm not discounting it. It's possible. It depends on where you feel the throat shot came from. I've always wondered where the throat shot bullet went.
Yeah,
What I've heard
it sure
down.
was. It wasn't that bullet that Landis found. I don't believe it. I don't think it was that. I think that bullet disappeared because if you look at pictures of with Buddy Walters, right? There's a unidentified FBI agent that's with him that's picking up a unidentified bullet. Okay.
Yep.
And so,
Yep. The one over by the sewer grate.
yeah. And so it could be that, maybe because they found pieces of Kennedy School everywhere, right? So it could have been the bullet back there. It could have been confiscated when they were cleaning the detail of the car. It could have been wedged under the seat. We don't know what happened to all the bullets of it, but I do buy, like Paul Blow said last episode, I do buy into the windshield of the car. I mean, there is a clear photo of a bullet hole in there.
It's correct. And whether that came from behind or from in front, but it sure as hell didn't come from the school book depository, because if it came from behind, it's on a lot lower trajectory than what that would have been. But I think there was 5 to 6 shots at least. I think there were 2 headshots, and I'm basing that off of um, Josiah Thompson's and Robert Tannenbaum's explanation of it. That shows why there's a little bit of a forward motion at the same time. I think it's a 1.7 second difference. And I think that's possible, but but it's a totally different trajectory than Dale Meyer's, cartoon animation off that that he's shown for years, that everything funneled back to the cone of the 6th floor window. He's one person that, like, I actually have a little bit of respect for Posner because of some of his other works that he's done.
We'll get into the medical evidence, but all right. So I want to talk about the triangulation of fire that had happened. Doug Horn also talked about the multiple headshot, and I agree with that. I think because the cerebellum that was coming back out of the brain, which many, like you said, 20 to 40 doctors had already, they saw the big hole in the back of the head. I mean, it is a possibility. That's the reason why I believe Pitzer was silenced, because I believe that he had footage of what the head wound was, right? I believe that with the gaping hole in the back of the head, and of course the flap that was up here on the side of the head by the temple, it would lead me to believe that there was multiple. I mean, it was like at least 2 shots to the head there. Had to have been. I mean, and these snipers were really precise. Like, they were super, super precise.
Yeah. And that's why I think the first shot was a dummy shot. And it was to get everybody kind of stopping in their tracks and confused, because everybody thought it was a backfire. It didn't hit anything. Except, unfortunately, it did hit something. I mean, he was probably meaning to shoot into the grass, and he hit the damn curb, and it hit James Tague at the underpass. And then that caused the whole need for the single bullet theory. But, I think that was a distraction shot. And I think you had at least 3, one on the records building. I think you had one, actually, you probably had 4, because you had one on the records building, one probably in the Daltex building. That was the one I'm not sure of, although it was weird that Eugene Brading, who was also at RFK's assassination, was rolling around and got arrested for being creepy. And then you obviously had somebody behind the picket fence. I never believed any of the crazy stories, like somebody down in a sewer drain and, somebody here. And, unfortunately, the photos and all from that time are so fuzzy that there's stuff that people have made out of nothing. But, and I'm going back to Last Second in Dallas again, when Josiah Thompson took the picture of, oh my gosh, why can I not fit? I just said his name a second ago. Skinny, behind the fence. Yeah. And then compares it to the Mormon photo, which everybody was always looking over on the other side at the supposed badge man picture, when you see the same anomaly in her photo, but then you see another photo later at the same time, and there's nothing there. And it's exactly where a head would be. And, and all of those guys that witnessed something, I mean, between Bowers, between the guy on top of the building across the street, to there's just too many witnesses, that, including police officers, that saw that. So that's where you have that triangulation, and that's what was going to happen in Chicago. Oddly enough, the rifles that they used in Chicago, there were some 303 Enfields that showed up for a brief moment in Dallas, but it was all Cuban snipers and Thomas Arthur Valley. Same type setup, high rise, building with a weird turn. So it's just about getting it in that slowed down kill zone, which the Dallas route was changed 2 weeks before. From most of what I've read, it was 2 weeks before the actual event, and all of a sudden you have that that dog leg that slows down to 11, 10 miles an hour. And contrary to popular belief, or some popular belief, the car never stopped, but it was going slow enough where what could be done was done. Then you go into the weird story of what happened to Kennedy's original driver. Died at Camp David of a heart attack 2 months before or something. I can't remember the exact time frame, but and he was quickly cremated. No autopsy, no nothing. Just had a heart attack, and the family was left kind of wondering what in the world. Well, that was Kennedy's experienced driver. Where the replacement wasn't his experienced driver. So whether either he panicked or he knew what he was doing, it doesn't add up there. And he was green, and the whole setup though. And obviously, if you want to know about all that stuff, Vince Palomara's got all of it. I've watched way more of his stuff than I cared to actually admit to, and I have listened to interviews with him on different places. He talks faster than anybody I've ever seen. He gets so worked up and excited because it's just so amazing the failures of that day, and the protection wasn't there at all, and it was such an odd setup. From why was this the one time? We talked a little bit about Trump's assassination attempt in July. Why was that the one time CNN happened to cover one of his events? Well, why in Dallas was the typical press truck put to the back of the line instead of in the front where it always is? Well, it's because they didn't want them taking pictures of it. And
okay, let me look at it. So you see what I'm saying? Things are so obvious that that's my point. Everything is so damn obvious about everything. It's like this is what frustrates me, Robert. It's like we all see how obvious everything is on this, and we're still on the hamster wheel spinning around and around and around and around and around and around. I'm like, you nailed it right there. What the hell? They normally have that truck right there with the cameras on it to take the picture of the president. Obviously, they didn't have that. And who in the hell has all the Secret Service agents riding in a car directly behind the president? Come on.
Well, and look, and the motorcycles. There's normally 8 motorcycles around, and they were all flanked from the back wheel back. And if no other evidence proves a shot from the grassy knoll, the blood splatter evidence on Hargis and I think it was Mitchell, the 2 motorcycles riding on the left side of the limo, of how Hargis thought he had been shot. He was hit so hard, and he was completely covered. But the guy behind him was only half covered because Hargis took the immediate hit. And so the blood splatter evidence, and I may get a name wrong here too, somebody can point that out and tell me I don't know what I'm talking about. But and that again, that comes from Josiah Thompson's research of how all that blood splatter went, and what Josiah Thompson also thought was that second, almost simultaneous headshot is what flew all over because all over the front of the car there was brains too. They were picking brains out of all parts of that car. And so, that's why I think the simultaneous 2 shots hit and caused his motion to go 2 different ways, because there is blood splatter in the front of the limo. And there are fragments that were found in the front of the limo. They were found that night and brought to the autopsy and then disappeared. But that blood splatter that goes from his head and goes diagonally back to hit those motorcycles that were, the first one was on the back wheel, and the other motorcycle was on the back wheel of the motorcycle in front of them. And it is a perfect pattern of, if you have any detective look at it that knows anything about blood splatter evidence, they're going to say the shot came from right there. And there's so many just simple things that point out, but because you can't say It was this guy behind the wall because here's a picture of him and here's the document that says it's him. You're like I said, we're stuck on the hamster wheel, because I think the biggest problem is everybody wants to know who, and we're never going to know who, I don't think, but we're going to know who put him there. That will come out. And I believe it was that same group that was enacted before Kennedy was even president, because the mob and everybody else expected Nixon to be president. And he was already running all that covert op stuff beforehand, and it was just going to flow right into his presidency. And when it didn't, they panicked. And when they found out that that Kennedy wasn't going to support the Bay of Pigs, when he continued to ramrod the mob and basically betrayed them. When was it Giancana or Trafficani that Bobby Kennedy dropped off in like Guatemala or whatever out in the middle of the woods? Or Martello, yeah. Not Gian, I don't know why I said Giancana at that point, but you know, they pissed off a lot of people that were involved in the Cuban assassination teams, and I truly believe they just redirected it and said, we got to take this guy out first because he's messing up all of our operations. He's going to blow the CIA up. He is hard charging the mob. He is not going to go to Vietnam. He's not going to go after Cuba. He's not going to do all these games that we want to play, and he's got to be taken out. And so the who was behind the fence, who was in the this building, I don't think we'll ever come to a consensus, and unless something just crazy somebody finds some crazy document.
You would need photographic evidence. You would also need really, like you had just mentioned, strong documentation stating like, this person was here, this person was there. I mean, like you'd need to have the seal of the CIA stamped on that, or the FBI, what they believe. But I kind of echo what you believe. I believe it was. I mean, mine differs just in a way from what I've gathered is mostly like the MIC and the CIA working mostly in conjunction with a lot of different important people that in the know. It was almost like a council, like group of people.
Oh yeah.
That were aware of this, and there was two phases of this. There was the pre-phase, actually three, excuse me. The pre-phase, the execution, and then there was the post-phase. Now, I believe Lyndon Johnson and Hoover were orchestrating the post-phase of that. I believe that you sell the narrative. Obviously, you mentioned brilliantly earlier that he didn't want to have another war. So they just pinned it on the lone gunman, but it all has to tie into each other through phases. We will never.
I'm not sure. I'm not sure Johnson wasn't involved beforehand, at least of having knowledge, because he was fixing to get fed to the wolves with the Bobby Baker scandal and all. I mean, he was fixing to go up in front of the Senate, and he was fixing to be in big trouble. And he was not going to be on the ticket the next year. I don't think it started with him. I think it started elsewhere, but I think he got brought into it because they knew he was going to be their, pawn to go into Vietnam, to go into they were hoping to go into Cuba and all these other things. And so I think he was a participant at the beginning of knowledge, but he was definitely a participant in cover up. I mean, he basically forced the Warren Commission on us and on them, and then appoints Alan Dulles to it and Gerald Ford. So Gerald Ford's the FBI informant on it. Dulles is the CIA informant on it, and they guide the narrative. And nobody clocked more days than Alan Dulles did in that. I mean, the other guys just hardly showed up, but Dulles was. I mean, what else did he have to do? And and he knew every game in the book, and David Bellin and all those guys that went out and did all the interviews and all, they just selectively. I mean, if you go through and read and just all the questions that got missed, Robert Tannenbaum's book is really good. It's really short. He does kind of go off on one thing that I don't think is really true. He and Robert Groden both are big on the McCone memo, saying that that the CIA trained Oswald and did all these things, but I'm not sure how valid that memo is, because if it is valid, that would have blown up the whole thing. Uh, but he talks about how selective they were with the questions, and even in just the very beginning of Rush to Judgment. I mean, they don't dig. They get the answer that they want, and or they rewrite the answer to the way they want, and they don't investigate. They just ask, okay, where were you standing? Were you there? Okay, what'd you hear? You heard 3 shots. Okay, good. All right, that's all we need. They just blew through it. It was not any kind of. It was a rubber stamped investigation from the beginning that started with the premise of Oswald's guilty. We have to draw the narrative back to him, and that's what they did.
Yeah, and I agree with you. I mean, when you said Dulles talked about nobody reads, I think it was done on purpose extensively to have that much volume of work, just so people wouldn't read it. Okay. And Dulles was right. I believe Dulles was a master manipulator. I mean, I believe he was the godfather of the CIA. I mean, like, he was the guy, and probably the most toxic human being to ever live. And so I think he had a lot to do with the initial part of the plotting and the coup and whatnot. So, but anyhow. So your final thoughts on that, and by the way, show our audience here that one more time about the book that you're reading right now.
The original Rush to Judgment. Found an original, an early copy, and some of these books you can't find anymore. Some of them are out of print, and or they're like Robert Groden's book. I want to get a couple of his, but he self publishes them, and they're a little pricey. But that Rush to Judgment's the one that started it all, and um, I wanted just to read it exactly how he wrote it, and then match it up with what we know now. And it's amazing how spot on he was. And he was calm and cool in interviews. He never got flustered. Um, I understand there is a video somewhere of him and David Atlee Phillips at a university in California debate.
UCLA. If you could find the original actually video footage of that's really rare. That's about it. That's about as rare as the William Harvey testimony at the House Assassination Committee. That's almost impossible to find. If anybody has it out there, please let Robert and I know. We would love to see that.
Because he was so good at just refuting points, and he was so calm, and he obviously he didn't get everything right, but he seems to have gotten a lot. The last one little thing about him, the one witness that kind of came out of nowhere, the Aquila Clemens, she just disappeared off the face of the earth. I mean, like, there's no record of her anywhere else after his interview with him, and that unfortunately, yeah, and that unfortunately kind of takes away from that account, because it almost makes it seem like she was, not really there. And I could see somebody doing that at that point in time, getting frustrated but not getting the answers. But yeah, she just disappeared into thin air. I mean, it's crazy.
Well, how possible do you think it is that the powers that be saw Rush to Judgment, the interviews, and they were like, "Oh, crap! I mean, we can't have 2 people on there kind of go on and live like, or like we can't have them be here. Like, I'm talking about Lee Bowers and Nicole Clemens. I mean, they were powerful witnesses in this whole thing, because Bowers could literally say, I saw some smoke there. There was commotion behind this area. I couldn't see it really well, but there was something going on there.
Well,
I mean,
and it perfectly corroborates SM Holland and all those guys that were on the bridge and all that. And, all that, you put all those people around that area, from the Newmans to even Ed Hoffman, all those people that are around, that they're telling the same story from different angles. Even the guy across the way that was on top of the building across the street, that saw the guy run through basically back towards where Lee Bowers was. You piece those things together, and there's got to be some truth in there. Hers is a little harder because every witness is so different around the Tippit shooting. And then she just poof disappears.
did you see how frightened she looked in that interview? She looked like she was just really. I mean, I know that Lane was doing his best to kind of, be comforting and whatnot. She
Well,
was
yeah, because she already
really
been visited and
uncomfortable. You could
told to
tell
shut
by the
up,
look on her face. She was just like,
according to what she herself said. And it's crazy the number of different people that I've heard, whether it was Jack Ruby and Larry Cranford, whether it was the other quote unquote Lee Harvey Oswald, and I've heard it was Westbrook. That's a whole other guy to get into. Wild, how they just show up everywhere. I didn't realize that Kenneth Croy was standing next to Jack Ruby when he shot Oswald, but he's he's standing, I think, right to his right.
I mean, you can't. Pardon my language. You can't make this shit up. This is just ridiculous. I mean, think about all the coincidences that we've talked about this full episode. You can't make any of this crap up. Everybody's linked to each other. Then you find out George DeMorenshield's like the uncle or godfather of Jackie Kennedy. It's like, what in the hell?
Yeah, and everybody that at the beginning, that between Mark Lane and Jim Garrison, all these people that said DeMorenshield CIA, Clay Shaw CIA, all these people, it ends up being true. Every one of them were, and it's documented that they were. And now you look, you probably saw what Matt Crumpton put out today about Jack Ruby having an AIN number with the CIA. And then my response to him was, holy crap, Harold Weisberg's on there too. Is Harold Weisberg CIA?
Probably was. I mean, let me say something. I mean, at this point, would you be surprised if like Mary Farrell was not CIA either? I mean,
you got to have, they got spooks everywhere.
That's what I'm saying.
And, you look on YouTube, and there's 500 different videos talking about the Kennedy assassination. And I guarantee you probably 300 of them are misdirections. And you start looking into Mockingbird and all that stuff. I mean, there's so many precursors to what we're seeing today. Obviously, that's still going on. If you look at Operation Northwoods, shockingly, it happens again in the Gulf of Tonkin, the mysterious second attack in the Gulf of Tonkin that gets us into Vietnam that didn't really happen. All the way up to you can even point to some people feeling like 9/11.
Or the weapons of mass destruction. Weapons of mass destruction, yeah.
And, I mean, and that's what makes it hard on. You take the ABC special that I was really looking forward to, because it was billed as being both sides. When I saw Oliver Stone and Jim DiEugenio on there, DiEugenio is not going to go on there and get punked. And then he went on there and got punked. They gave him like 5 minutes of screen time. And all it was talking about wanting the documents released. And it was such a whitewash. It was no different than the one that was run back in the 80s and the one that was run right after the assassination. It was just a complete whitewash of the Warren Commission. And it was gross. that it was in the things that they were saying. Um, Anything that was even the least bit controversial, they just blew it off like, oh, come on, man. It can't be that, because they know the average person's not going to go deeper than that. But it makes it hard for the voices that are actually out there working to get the truth, because it does matter. Just because it happened 62 years ago doesn't mean it doesn't matter now, because we're seeing the same things. Just look at, I mean, just the way the media is reporting things, what you see with your own eyes and what gets shown on TV, whichever avenue it is. I mean, they're all owned by like two companies. I mean, it's not that hard to. I mean, I got spooked when I saw it during COVID. This girl had done a video that took every newscast from all across the exact same thing, and it's freaky. And you get on social media, and there's bots doing the same thing on that, and so the fact that there's such an effort to disprove the conspiracy should really tell you that there is one. I mean, it really should. If there's that much, pushback and holding things back and fighting information coming out and things coming out so redacted that they don't mean anything, it's got to be a reason for it, or else they would just be like, hey, go look, who cares? Open them up. Yeah, we did some dirty things back in the day. We probably went and killed some people in other countries that we shouldn't have, but we didn't kill our president. But it's been fought at every turn since 2 hours after it happened. The narrative got shut down as soon as the FBI walked into the Dallas Police Department, basically took over the investigation. I mean, I've heard Jesse Curry say it, is, they came in and they basically took it over, and we let them have it. They didn't investigate anymore. They were more pissed off about Tippett getting killed, because they didn't understand why one of their guys had to get shot. They really honestly, and Jim Lavelle said it. He said, we really couldn't have cared about the president. I won't repeat what he said, that it was just like any certain type person getting shot in downtown Dallas on a Saturday night. But when you shoot one of their officers, it's a little different story. They want revenge on that guy. And I don't know. I don't understand Tippett's role in the whole thing. And it's obvious that it was something, because it was so weird. Even though he was where he was kind of supposed to be, but where he was waiting, and then when the bus didn't come, when he takes off and goes to the record store, makes a phone call, nobody answers, storms back out, and pulls over another car, freaks the guy out, and gets back in his car, and he's panicking. Why? Why is he panicking? What was his job? Was his job to intercept? Was he the backup if Oswald made it out of the school book depository? Then why did he have to?
I think he had a role in killing Oswald. I think that's what his role was. It was either that, or he was supposed to dispatch him to that red bird.
Yeah.
That he was supposed to take off on. And when he couldn't find him, because remember Oswald's landlady said that she heard some honking outside and there was a police car. What if I were to pose the question to you? What if that was Tippett that was honking at Oswald? What if it wasn't Westbrook?
I always thought it was Tippett.
You think it was Tippett? I always thought it was Westbrook.
Now, after reading or listening to Joseph McBride's stuff, I got to thinking it could be Westbrook. But from the beginning, I always thought it was Tippett that came by, and because that was the only logical thing that made sense to me, was he was supposed to meet up with Oswald for some reason, and at that point I never thought of he was waiting to take it. He was the backup to kill him. I always thought he was supposed to shuttle him off somewhere. Well, I don't think anybody ever expected him to get out of downtown Dallas that day. The other crazy thing is the military photographer that took pictures of the bus front and back, and then suddenly the same guy showed up outside the Texas school book, or the Texas theater, I can't remember what his name is. But it's really odd that this guy, and he takes a picture of the bus from far off. There's no reason to take that picture other than because it's 15 minutes after the assassination, 10 or 15 minutes, whatever it is. And he didn't realize that Oswald had gotten off the bus. So he was taking pictures of the bus because I think that's where he was going to get killed. Because there is a report of 2 officers getting on that bus with guns drawn. And those 2 officers are reported to be Westbrook and Croy.
And they're everywhere. They are everywhere. That's a great point. They're everywhere during that whole thing. Who finds the wallet? I mean, like, who finds the jacket? The jacket was planted. And we talk about how the jacket was dry cleaned and all that. And the Oswalds never dry cleaned their clothes. They were too, quote unquote, poor. And also, according to
the dry cleaner's tag was from a company out of California.
Correct. That is correct. And so you can link it to that, and then you have obviously the wallet, which they have pictures of. Is it Croy or Westbrook holding the wallet in the photo?
They're looking at it together. Westbrook's holding it, and Croy's standing next to him, and then somehow suddenly Westbrook is front and center at the Texas Theater. I mean, it's almost like they knew where to go. And then right after that, where does Westbrook go? CIA, Vietnam. So, I mean, you got to be stupid to not think these things are connected. And to be as arrogant, and I get it, to be as arrogant as somebody like Gerald Posner is about it, to say that, oh, those things don't matter and just blow them off. That was the funny thing of reading Case Open by Harold Weisberg about Posner coming in and going through all of his files and how he just abused them and just completely left stuff out. And just, if it wasn't what didn't fit his narrative, he just blew it off as, oh, they just weren't really paying attention, or they were, that was just a clerical error or something like that. I mean, come on.
Yeah. Well, that's what him and Fred Lipwin do. They don't listen to anything. They think that it's just, I don't want to single them out initially, but I just anybody in that community,
he's an easy, Gerald Posner's an easy target because his is the definitive book on defending the Warren Commission and has been since '91. And he's very open. I've talked back and forth with him on Twitter, and he's always. And I think he is either he really truly believes that story, or he was guided to write that story. But I mean, like I said, he's done other works. The stuff he's talking about with vaccines now and some other things are really spot on. And I enjoy the guy, and I appreciate the fact that he is open to a lot of that. So, and he's always willing to defend his side of it. But I don't see how you can believe none of this other stuff happened. So,
well, to that note, Robert Birch, it has been a pleasure to have you on the show. We're going to do part 2 of this coming up here after the new year. I mean, you are one of the faster rising researchers that we have going on right now, especially on X, and we're really excited to have you. And I'm excited to actually start a working relationship with you on here. Yeah. And it's going to be a lot of fun. And so I just want to thank you for joining us on our first episode with you. That way our audience can get familiar with you. And where can they follow you on X?
It is rbirch, the number 10 on X. I'm really kind of boring. I read more than I post, but I have enjoyed some of the conversations that I've had lately with you and some of the guys that you've had on your show, because you're very relatable, and it's you don't present things that are kind of over people's heads. I think it's very matter of fact and very based. So I appreciate it, and I appreciate being a part of it, and look forward to doing it again.
Yep. Look forward to having you back on. And to our audience, as I say every episode, the truth is out there. we thank you very much. We'll see you on the next episode.